There you go. All right. So let's go ahead and introduce Matt or Steph. Who wants to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. My name is Matt Heagerty. I wrote Martian Ghost Centaur. Some other books I wrote have been Unplugged and Unpopular, and I have another book that's coming out in July called Lumberjackula that I wrote. And different people drew them because I don't draw myself. So a lot of what we'll be talking today about is kind of how a collaboration can work in comics, and how it can work. There's some terms that you use. You were saying storyboard, but if we look at just like how you script a comic, it can be really, really interesting and unique. And I'm so lucky that I got to work with Steph.
Okay, I guess I'll take that as my cue. I'm Steph. I was the artist on Martian Ghost Centaur, and I also have an upcoming graphic novel series coming out through Harper Alley next year called Club Kickout. That's all about friendship and pro wrestling and being a nerd, and it's really cool. And that'll be next year. But yeah, I'm really excited to be here and really excited to talk about the process with Matt.
Okay. Tell us about your graphic novel, The Martian Ghost Centaur. What is the story about?
Do you want to?
Yeah. So Martian Ghost Centaur is about this really cool, very unique kind of like tourist town called Southborough, where their big draw in big industry is like the Sasquatch sighting. And they've kind of made their whole town about it, about places where people have sighted the Sasquatch. And over the years, it's kind of gone away because, you know, with the rise of the internet and, you know, different like myth busting kind of stuff, people are believing in it less and less. And the main character, Louie, and her best friend, Felix, both really love their town. But Louie really wants to kind of preserve the magic of like the myth of the Sasquatch and cryptids there. And she wants to bring tourism back to her town so she can save it from being bought out by a big rich conglomerate jerk. And so her and her friend Felix kind of hatch a plan to make their own like new myth for the town to try to save it.
Good job. And for sure, it's that a lot of it came from at the time living in San Francisco and seeing like a really special neighborhood and a special bar that I worked in called El Rio in the Mission District. Seeing just like this whole entire different world come in, and just really little regard for the world that was there before. And so that was the first start, and then it also kind of looks at what getting a first job and kind of grappling with the idea that a job doesn't have to define you. A job, your passion can be, doesn't have to be where you get your money, and your job can just be where you get your pay, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be your life.
Right. How'd you guys end up working together?
I approached at the time a company called Lionforge that ended up going to becoming one with Oni Press, and I came in with the story originally just a document of what I wanted to tell, and then I had a list of artists who I wanted to work with, and Steph was at the top of them because she made a really great comic, web comic called Jet Black. And I came across that and was like, whoa, this is so good. A big suggestion for anyone who is doing comics and really interested in drawing and working as a comic artist is, I would say, really a web comic where you post and show like the quality of work that Steph showed and consistently posting. It's like, I think it's like the best calling card you could have. You can have so many great drawings, but showing like I can tell a sequential story, I can post it, you know, week after week and continue to do it is it's a rarity, really. So when you someone's good as Steph, you're like, oh, please work with me.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I got an email. I remember I think I got an email from the editor approaching me about work with Matt. And at the time I was just doing the web comic, and I really wanted to get into like more like published comic work, even though I do love web comics, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. But like Matt said, it's kind of like the best business card you could have, because if you can show people you can tell a story and you can hook readers in, or you have a unique style that can draw people in, it was great. And so I got an email from the editor and from Matt, and they sent me the script to look over. I read the script and I fell in love with it, and I was like, yes, so this is like the most tailored project to me that could ever exist, like outside of something I wrote. Like it felt like something I would write. So and from there we started working together after contract stuff. So
Yeah.
I have a question. Was this your first graphic novel, Steph?
this was my first.
Yes.
Yeah, this was my
Your first published graphic novel.
My first published. Yeah, I did a few like illustrations and little mini comics for another Line Forge. They did like a D&D style magazine / like book called Rolled and Told, and I did a few like kind of little like freelance comics for that. But like this was Martian Ghost Centaur was like my first like major published book.
Nice.
So how long did it take you guys to complete the whole graphic novel? This one, the Martian Ghost.
Sure. So my part is very different time-wise than Steph's part. That's a big part of comics that's really interesting. I mean, working with someone when you're a writer. So if you look at it, my timeline started before I started pitching. So it starts with like coming up with the basic idea of getting a really strong outline together, which we'll actually have we have a PowerPoint later that I'd love to show everyone that kind of goes up bit by bit of these steps and shows actual, Steph's art. But, getting that together plus writing the script for me was maybe like 4 months. I think that's a realistic timeline. I don't know exactly, but then handing it off to Steph. And I mean, there's just so many more steps that I have my involvement in. I was able to see and comment on and say, you did really good. I basically turned into a cheerleader for the rest of the book. And then come back in at the way end and I do dialogue edits based on Steph's art because it's just such an important part. But anyways, Steph, yes, you can say.
Yeah, and I kind of compare like, because you can go in and do comics. Like right now, the book series I'm working on now is I'm the writer and the artist, and the process, you just kind of take on a lot more. But I think a really nice thing about working with a writer as an artist is like it's kind of like doing a relay race. It feels like Matt does the writing part, and then after a few months, I get past the baton, which is like basically the script, and then it's just like go time. And then for my part, for like completion, I want to say it was like a year and a half, maybe a year and a half to almost 2 years. Like it took a pretty long time. I mean, I don't know if it's not, everyone has kind of their different process, because like there's some people who can like churn out a book in like a year, and then there's some people who it can take like 3 years, and like one of those isn't correct over the other, because I think you kind of have to learn your pacing, and there's multiple steps to making comics. There's sketching and designing characters, there's doing the layouts and like kind of like the thumbnails or the storyboards, and then there's like actual coloring in different steps, where for some people it might take them a week to ink a whole chapter, but for some people it might take them like 4 months to ink a whole chapter. So it just really depends. But for this first book, I think it was like a year and a half for just my part. I
think so. You were fast. You're saying that it wasn't. You were very fast. Like I remember being like really really impressed by the speed, because besides the books that are that I've discussed, I have a couple more that are getting worked on, and everyone has their own speed. But then also for every book, not all of them are they coloring, or are like different people are coming in for different jobs on some books. My first book, Unplugged and Unpopular, Tintin Bentoa, drew it, but then Mike Amante colored it, and then there was Hassan Otsman Ahul. He did the lettering. So there's like lots of different people who come in, and then there's some books where someone does it all. So that really does like impact the amount of time that something takes to happen. When you do an assembly line, like finished inks handed on to colorists go on, it can be much faster, but Steph's very fast and very good.
Thank you. Self-esteem raised.
So let's talk about the steps for those who want to get into developing or creating their own graphic novel. First, let's start with the storyboard. What is that?
Sure. What, you know, this might be a good time to maybe bring up. I have a PowerPoint presentation. If we're able to have me share it, I think that might be good because we can show Steph's actual art and kind of bit by bit what goes from there. If not, no worries. We can always just talk through it. But I think, am I able to share screen? Yes. I am. Perfect. Thank you, guys.
There you go.
There we go. All right. And slideshow, play from start. All good now? We see it?
Yes.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So there's the cover of Martian Ghost Centaur. Looks rad. Steph did a very good job. Okay. So I mentioned earlier that we start off with like a proposal. Proposal's longer than this, but this is basically a roughly what you're getting at. It changes from project to project, but you basically want to have a one sentence, one paragraph max telling what you want to tell for a story, like really if you're approaching a publisher, that is, telling them exactly how they would sell the book. You want to tell them the format, which is it a 100-page book? Is it going to be black and white? Things like that. I think it helps to tell who you think it would work for. Like, oh, someone who really liked Dogman would like my book Lumberjackula because of this. Then also, I have a section on themes. I don't think everyone does, but I like to do that, talk about what I want to talk about with the book. Then this is, I think, specifically for writers, and I'm sure, Steph, this was very much when you were pitching your series, but like the synopsis is just such an important part of it. You write this like 5-page synopsis of what the book will be, and you're telling everything. You're not saying, and we'll see what happens, and then action happens, or like you're really laying out what the story will be in as few words possible. To sell them on the story, not holding back anything. But this is the hard part, because it's also like, oh, but that part's really important. Like, I love that joke about Full House. And it's like, no, you can't put that joke about Full House in the synopsis. You have to put like really just the core basics of the story. So anyways, that gets in. I get that to an editor. They say, oh, this is cool. I like it. Let's make it. Then for this book, particularly, Steph came on. And then Steph did some character designs based on some really basic ideas that I had written out of what I thought the character should look like. Which, Steph, I don't know if you want to talk on that.
Yeah, kind of my first step as like the artist involvement with this, and it was like at the part where Matt and our editor were kind of going over like last minute edits for the script before handing it off for me to do the art. So while they were doing that, I was kind of doing designs for the main characters. And you don't have to do it for like every single character that ever shows up in the book, but for at least like kind of the main players. I did sketches and then would show them to Matt and our editor Grace, and we would kind of go back and forth on what we wanted to change. And honestly, like with our 2 lead characters, Felix is on the left, Louis is on the right. They were actually probably the most straightforward. I think Louis had like maybe 2 different haircut versions, and then she was finalized. And I think Felix pretty much was set from the get-go. Like we're all just like,
that first sketch was done. Yeah,
there's a few other characters that took a little bit more tweaking and everything, but that was just to kind of get the ball rolling so that when it came time to actually start sketching and drawing, I didn't have to like worry about being like, wait, what are they going to look like? I have to learn how to draw them again. Or, halfway through drawing the book, we decided we actually want them to be much shorter or something,
For sure. And in certain stories, like some characteristics of how the character look can really, really matter, like really make a difference for plot points. And sometimes it's just, they look how they look.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love her designs, and specifically, I feel like this is something that's lost on a lot of comics. I feel like so often people don't look at modern style at all, and or they just have a, go really basic. And Steph had stuff that like people wear this, like people that I see actually wear these clothes, and I feel like that makes the story just so much more real. For
yeah, I highly recommend, if you ever need inspiration for character design or outfit design, like don't be afraid to Google, or I use Pinterest a lot to look at, like, I mean, the characters in this book are teenagers, and not that I'm very far removed, but I was like, okay, like Louie's she lives in like Pacific Northwest kind of area. She lives in a place where you like hike a lot. She's a little bit more of like an active lifestyle, but like she also, likes kind of more like trendy fashions, but she's also not like super, she doesn't live a lavish lifestyle. So like kind of looking at different, fashion items like on Pinterest and stuff, that kind of like, I would just save things to a folder labeled for each character and be like, oh, this is something she would wear. Like, I think literally the pants she's wearing, they have like the little ties down the side. I saw on like Pinterest or something. And same for Felix. I was like, he's a character who wants to become a trainer, like a personal trainer. And in the start of the book, he starts like a little bit heavier, but near the end of the book, when there's more of like a time skip, you kind of see him get a little bit more fit and a little more, like confident and stuff. And that was something I really wanted to reflect in his design, that like no matter what, he always looks really good. But like personally, my favorite character, I know I shouldn't have favorites, but I do. And I think it's important when designing a character, and it doesn't have to be like they have to have the most specific outfit ever, but I think it's good to reflect your character's personality traits in their clothes, because I think it's a big visual cue for the audience to know, oh, if they're rich, they wear more like refined things or more lavish things, or maybe, if they're more carefree, maybe something looser fitting, just stuff like that to think about, to add that extra bit of character to your characters.
I have a question. This is a question that someone asked me to ask you. They couldn't make it. How did you find your art style?
I get this question quite frequently, and I think it's something that just kind of happens naturally over time. I know it's kind of like the answer a lot of people don't really want to hear, is that like it just kind of happens. But like honestly, I feel like everyone's kind of inspired by something. I was really inspired by anime growing up. And then around like college time, I was really inspired by like Scott Pilgrim was like a big inspiration. And over time, kind of like little pieces of things in media I would be inspired by would kind of blend together and like form my natural drawing style. Honestly, for me, the big thing that kind of like shaped my thing was like, I kind of ask myself, do I like drawing this way, or do I feel like I can convey my message or emotions the best way with the way I'm drawing? And I kind of adapt to that. I really like strong, bold, kind of simplified shapes. Like there's a lot of artists who have like very detailed and intricate line work, which I super love. But for me, it's just not really how I like to draw, because my brain just doesn't work like that personally. So I kind of try to find a way that feels like when I'm drawing this, I'm enjoying myself and I feel like I can convey a message. But also like over time, I think you just naturally pick up on your style. And like, I don't think it's ever really fully formed, because like you can even look at something like Scott Pilgrim or like just any comic series or animation series even, and look at like book one to the last book and see that there's subtle changes, or things maybe got simplified, or the way the characters are drawn has changed in some way. And I think it happens naturally over time. But like, if you're an artist looking for your style, I'd say, as hard as it is sometimes to not worry, like don't fret over it. It's gonna happen. One day you're gonna be drawing and someone's gonna look at your work and be like, oh my gosh, how'd you find your style? Like, your style's so cool. Like, it looks so confident. And you're gonna be like, I don't know. It just happens. So it's the old adage of, just keep drawing, keep looking at stuff, keep in mind what inspires you, and it'll happen.
Agree.
Very good answer. So after characters, I kind of did it out of order, but so here's what a script looks like, the script that I gave to Steph. So this is just page 1 of our book. Everyone's looks different. That's like, in screenwriting, it's like a set format and you have to write a certain way. In comics, there's things you're supposed to do, but there is no definite format that everyone uses. There's no breakdown of things. The things you do need to do is dependent on how you're working with someone. You can break down the panels. Sometimes people don't. But when I work with people, I tend to break down panels. But then I also have a really important thing that I write in the beginning of every script that I think is super important for people, that basically says, this is a script. It's not a,
I think I know how to get to
mandate. It's a map. It's, do what you will with it. But I want to work with you. I trust you. I'm not saying this has to be broken down exactly this way, because many times Steph or any of my collaborators has a much better way of visually telling the story than I had. So it's really important to just have, as a collaborator, a bend, which I see a lot of not happening in early career for a lot of comic writers. And I think it's a big mistake, because you don't get something as great out of it. And then, we're working on this together. It's our book. So that's just a hugely important thing for writers to remember. So anyways, I will break down the panels. Those are little boxes within our comics, and give brief descriptions of what's happening there. Sometimes they're really long. Sometimes you're writing like a ton of description to get this little thing. Sometimes it's just they dance, and that's just what the script calls for. And then also in between, I'm writing what the dialogue will be, so that Steph is able to know where to lay out room for these dialogue boxes when she's drawing these things. This is a 7-page panel, or 7-panel page. I tend to, in middle grade and kids comics, tend to be less than that, but this one just happens to be 7. But then afterwards, I hand this script over to Steph, and then she steps to goes to the next step, which is thumbnails.
Yeah, so thumbnails are kind of, I feel like they're like the unsung heroes of comic making, because when I first started drawing comics, even just like for fun, when I was like, 12, 13, whatever, I'd have this really cool idea, and then I'd go straight to trying to like draw it directly into the panels, which like some people can do, but like thumbnails are really great because you can kind of do a quick little sketch, an idea, to see if the way that you're thinking of the scene in your head actually plays out on the page. And the point of these is like, this one is blown up, but like thumbnails are literally like supposed to be like an inch by an inch, like, very tiny. And it's basically just blocking out like, okay, there's 7 panels on here. How am I going to lay that out? Like, what panels need more space and what needs less? And like, is there a way we can lay it out so that there's like, at the bottom of the panel, there's a big emotional reaction of him screaming. And, it's important to think, hey, should that be in like a smaller panel? Is this an inconspicuous moment we don't need to think of that much? Or is this like a big moment that like we need to, take note of? And so little stuff like that goes in here. But the nice thing about this is like, they're basically just stick figures. Mine, this was my first time doing a major book, so they're probably even a little bit more fleshed out than I think most thumbnails should be. Because literally some people, it's literally just like circle stick, the most basic little stick man ever. And it's literally just for placement and to see, make sure you have space for the words to fit if it's a scene that has a lot of talking. And it's just a really good way to kind of play around and like see how you want to lay things out, or see how you want to like position characters within the panels or the scene within a panel, so that when it comes time to actually draw and like start making that final product that's gonna be out in the world, you know, you've kind of already played around and you're like, oh, okay, if I lay it out this way, it makes sense. Or like, maybe I don't even need this panel, or maybe I don't need to show this character here. Maybe it's more important to show the thing they're holding or something. So at this point, you know, it's just like really quick, really loose. You know, there are no right answers at this point. It's just figuring out what conveys the story the best and just kind of getting it down quickly. And then the next step, and this is kind of where we transition to, this is going to be the final product that goes out into the world, is what's called pencils. And it may seem a little bit repetitive, but it's basically, and some people actually skip this step. Like I have some friends who do, and you know, you do what feels right to you. I'm a person who needs a little bit more of like a detailed roadmap to get to where I'm going. But pencils are where you start laying down like the actual art, and you can see the characters actually have like faces and hair and outfits, and the backgrounds are more detailed. And as someone who personally has struggled with drawing backgrounds for a while, it's really helpful at this stage for me, at least, to be like, okay, like if I put the forest this far back, it looks reasonable, because sometimes I tend to draw bigger than I should. And this is also a good time to like get out all the ideas you have and kind of get everything just where you want it before you ink. And yet again, some people don't need to be this detailed. Some people literally can ink straight off of like stick figure type stuff or their thumbnails, and that's totally fine. But definitely for like, I think for like people starting out or just wanting to explore, or just even people who have done it for years and just prefer it this way, you know, it's just a little bit more detailed. And also when you're working with other collaborators, it's a good space to show Matt or the editor and be like, hey, does this look good to you? And does this kind of match your vision as well? And yeah.
So, sorry, I was going to say, yeah, and it's a good step to, I mean, they're all good steps to catch something before it goes on. Like, oh no, that character has to be on the other side because of the talking order, or like it. I think sometimes it's hard to catch things in thumbnails. You can sometimes, but it's really easy to catch things in pencils and be like, oh, actually, if the character is holding a knife in this scene, that won't make sense because later on they aren't supposed to have a knife. You know, there's little things like that editors will be looking for. Steph's pencils, by the way, are so detailed, and you'll see next that like I feel like you could have upped the contrast on it and it would be
honestly,
it's very different for certain people I work with. Some people I work with, their pencils are just very, very rough. You can still see the base of what's happening, but the difference between Steph's and then, I mean, if you see when she goes to things,
yeah,
it's very, she had already done the like lion's share of the work before she got here.
Yeah, and yeah, over time, like the book series I'm working on now, like my pencils are a lot looser now. And even by the end of this book, by the end, I stopped like putting every like branch on every tree. I started being like, it's a triangle, you know, it's a tree, like. But the next step is my personal favorite, but it's also one that's probably the most time intensive for me. And it's also one that I know a lot of people starting out can kind of be frustrated with. It's called inking. And this is basically putting down what's going to be your final line. Some people also just do pencils for their final, like, you know, depending on the style of the comic, some people literally just have pencils and they'll color over it or just leave it as is. Really no wrong or right way. I think when we're thinking of like a lot of more like mainstream published comics, you tend to see stuff more like this, where I ink digitally. I use like an iPad Pro with like Procreate, but you can also use a lot of other different, there's so many alternatives, and also doing it traditionally with, you know, just like pen and paper is also great. But this step is basically kind of just like pencils part 2, but just for real, like for the final, this is the final line that's going to go to print. So it's kind of speak now or forever hold your peace with any details you want. And this part I kind of like because with being the artist, it's not like I wrote the script, but there's really fun moments in it where in the environment I got to draw little visual gags or silly little signs or details on their shirt that are just like little silly goofs, kind of like all of like The Simpsons or something, where it'll just like the background will have all these like little references. And so I tend to like this part because there's a lot of time where I think the artist gets to really shine and just be like, like I get to draw the fun like details and fashion and environment and kind of make it very unique. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward in terms of it's just a lot of drawing over your own drawings and adding the details, but it's personally my favorite. But I know for a lot of people, inking is something that takes a while to learn. And everyone inks very differently. Some people are much looser, some people are much more like me, where it's just very solid, everything's closed off. So yeah, this part was the most time consuming for me. But once that's done, honestly, the next step is, if you want to go to the next slide, is laying down the colors. And for me, this is actually probably the least time consuming thing, because it's more so, it's kind of like doing the longest coloring book you'll ever have in your life. And a lot of people tend to, once they get to like the more like pro leagues, or if they have a collaborator, even on like indie projects or something, can like either hire or collaborate with another artist to do the colors, because there's a lot of people who like really know their way around color palettes and like do amazing work. And I did the colors on this book, and it's just, yeah, it's a lot of, it's like I said, it kind of mostly feels like it's cool because color can set the tone, and you want to kind of think of that when you're coloring. So like with this scene, it takes place at night and it's a little like more mysterious. So I was like thinking, instead of just doing like literal green trees in a green forest, I was like, it would be kind of cool and more like spooky to have like purple and cool hues that kind of evoke more of like a mystical feeling to it. So yeah, it's just a lot of coloring, and also having to keep everyone's colors, like hair color or skin color or outfit color, consistent. I would like take little snapshots of them just so I could like reference the colors later on in the book, so that Louis' hair doesn't go from like orange to like straight up fire truck red at the end or something. But yeah, this is just kind of one of the points where it's just like, all right. And if you're doing a shorter comic, it's not as big of a tour. It's usually kind of one of the most fun parts, because like I said, it kind of feels just like a big coloring book almost. And then this is just kind of like the second part of it, where I like to add shading and kind of mood lighting, kind of like the shadows on his face to really emphasize the drama. Some people do it all at once. I kind of, I'll lay down the flats. When you lay down just basic color, it's called flatting. And then like coloring more so is considered when you kind of add the nuance and the shading and light and stuff like that, which not every comic has, but just another element to think about. And then after this, we hired a letterer, because lettering is very tough for me. And he did an amazing job. And he basically just goes in and adds all the word balloons in and makes sure everything, kind of looks right and flows right. And pretty much at this point, like the actual work for the artist is done. Like my point, like the artist point, unless you're also doing lettering, kind of ends at the final coloring phase. But some people also do their own letters. But I prefer to work with a letterer. But at this point, the book, like the art portion, is done. And yeah.
And then I'll go through and look at my script and what I had written, and usually not huge changes, but I'll say, oh, that line becomes redundant because Steph drew this, which really shows you that, or like, that drawing's really great and I'm clogging up by saying way too much in this area, so I'll cut some dialogue that maybe isn't needed. So you just kind of like clean it up and work through that. Then, oh yeah, then we're done. Oh hey, this is Steph's book. This is Steph's next book.
This was just a preview of the characters from my next book series, because I can't really show much of the actual work because it's literally in process of being worked on right now. But these are the main characters though. but also like you can kind of see like already like different stylistic changes from book to book, even though they can be kind of like not huge jumps. But I think a big thing I learned doing this and just making comics from when I was doing them in my bedroom for fun to doing them professionally like years and years later is that, you know, you're going to come into your own. It's literally about persistence and learning from your mistakes. And especially when you're collaborating with a writer and an editor, I still to this day, and I've worked professionally for a few years now, I'll send notes out or I'll send in drawings or scripts, and I still get nervous waiting for feedback and critique, being like, oh my gosh, like they're gonna think it's terrible or stupid or whatever. And then I get feedback, and most of the time, sometimes they'll be like, oh, this doesn't work, or I don't know if we need this, but it'll be like, oh, this is cool, like, or maybe you should consider this. And a good thing to do is to realize that like critique is there to help you. You don't have to take all of it. You know, you can pick and choose what works for you, but like it's also good to listen to your collaborators or, you know, those, you know, you want to look over it, because you learn a lot from that and you become a better storyteller and a better artist. And it's okay and honestly encouraged to make mistakes, because you learn best from those. And, you know, I think the best part about comics is like it's always a learning process. Even as like a professional, you know, I feel a lot more confident in my art and my storytelling skills, but there's still always so much I learn literally every day I do this. And I'm sure it's probably the same for you, Matt.
It is, yeah. I mean, I have 2 books on submission right now. My agent's sending them around, and you know, if I went in just with the idea that I'm infallible, I've had like 5 books, so I know what I'm doing, then I wouldn't get any books made, and you know, I wouldn't get better, because I have to listen to really the feedback that editors say, and as Steph said, you know, listen to some of it, don't listen to all of it, like, which is a hard thing to gauge, but so my next book is this book, Lumberjackula, that comes out in July. And when this was out on submission, it was so funny, like that I can't believe how different everyone's suggestions were and things that people loved were things that people hated. And it's like, you know, some get rid of the beard, some, what if we just call him Jack, Lumberjackula, we don't like the name, some, I love the name. And it all just becomes like that, and you have to kind of take the sum of the average of what people are saying and take it in, and then on top of it, know what you want, and know the story you want to tell, because the truth is, if you go through this and just do everything that every editor tells you or every collaborator tells you, you're not really doing your art, you're not doing what you set out to do, you're not telling the story you want to tell. So, but it's really it's a ride, because you cannot just stick to that, or else you might not ever get anything made. But anyways, this book comes out in July. I'm very excited about it. It was drawn by Sam Owen. He's amazing.
Nice.
And maybe I'll close this out now, because that was the end of our little presentation.
Slide of Felix falling down to his doom. No.
Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah.
So one last question. What advice do you guys have for kids who are barely starting to develop their own graphic novel?
I would say, oh, sorry, Steph, you go first. I don't want to.
You can go.
Oh, sure. I would say starting small is a really good idea. I think that everyone has an idea at first that they want to write that like 12-issue comic book. That was my first thing. I mean, first thing I wanted to do, I was like, I'm going to make this giant epic. But the reality is there's so much learning that happens in that first project, first 2 projects, first 3, that setting out to do something that's 200 pages, that's cool. But by the end of that 200 pages, I have a feeling you might want to be telling a different story. You might want to be doing something different, most likely. I'm not, it's going to be different for every person, but I think that starting small, then you have a finished story that you can show people, something that really 90% of the people, 95% of the people who set out with the interest of doing something like this actually don't get to. I think a lot of people don't finish and don't actually do the, like, all right, here is my, you know, even if it's a 5-page comic, here's my 5-page comic. It is done. It is real. I can send it to you, send it at a convention. So I'd say start small would be my biggest advice.
Yeah, I would also say that, because I was the same way, even when I was like 12, 13, 14, and I wanted to make like web comics, because it was like kind of like the first initial boom of them. And I would see these like sprawling web comics that have been going on for years. And like, I, give big kudos to web comic creators, because, oh my gosh, it's a lot of work for like sometimes no pay. And I guess the thing for me is I would also get like overly ambitious. And I think it's like, great, don't lose your spark, don't lose your, like, you can make that big project one day, you can like return to something, but it's also okay to explore and put things on the back burner to focus on something smaller. Because I started seeing a lot more success and like even just like kind of being like happier when I made my first I think my first like completed comic was literally like 10 or 12 pages, and it was black and white, and I printed it off my printer and like stapled it together to sell it at conventions. And the feeling of being like, this is complete and it's done, it's not perfect, it's not like I'm not ready to ship it off to like Marvel or something, but it was the fact that someone at a convention or one of my friends or family members could hold it in their hands and be like, oh, this is a complete idea. And that's really cool, and it shows that you can, I think most importantly, it shows to yourself that you can do it. And there's a lot of different steps to comic making. And I think, when I was younger and starting off, I was very much being like, okay, I have to learn all these very technical things, and I have to buy all the products all the pros use, and I have to, and I think it's exploring with what you have and what you can do. It's always great to get like really expensive pens or like get like a fancy tablet, but like that's also not going to make you a better artist. It can only kind of like help. But like, if you are a good storyteller and, a good communicator, a good visual communicator, like you can draw on a napkin with a marker, and I think it's just really important to like keep that creative spark going. And there's going to be frustration. It's tough. It's comics are very labor intensive as opposed to, just purely writing, which is also very labor intensive, but at least it's your kind of your final product. You don't really have to keep like being like, okay, now I have to reinterpret it and then reinterpret it again. But comics are a process, and they're always going to be, but like you just got to keep that creative spark, and know that not everything has to be perfect. You don't have to be ready to go to the big leagues. You never have to if you don't want to. And it's more so about your enjoyment, the story you want to tell, and learning how to best tell it. So I just, yet again, not the most fun, unique advice ever given, but like just keep drawing, keep writing. If you like to do it, pursue it. If you don't, that's cool too. But I think it's just something that if you enjoy it, like just do it however you can. You don't have to be forcing yourself to be at a level you think you should be.
So nice. That's pretty good. So for those who are part of this participation, we'll be giving out one of your graphic novels. So if they're currently listening to us or watching us, come by and pick up your copy today. And thank you guys. I really appreciate your insight of the whole process of developing a graphic novel. I think it's really informative for those who really want to pursue that path. Any other words you guys want to share with us?
Thanks for having us. I'll say Steph said one thing about like you can draw with anything, and you really can. There's two books that come to mind that are amazing that were drawn with Bic pen, and it's Lowriders in Space, and then another book called My Favorite Thing is Monsters, and those are both drawn. Those were both drawn with literally Bic pen. So like the materials you use, cool, but like you can do it with anything. I mean, if you're really amazing artists like they are, but you probably
can get there if you want.
Nice.
Yeah, and I also want to say thanks for listening. Hope you enjoy the books, and yeah, just comics are great and really love them, and I hope you all enjoy making them.
Oh, your book is awesome.
Thanks.
I really
guys.
like it, guys.
Yeah, it's pretty funny too.
Uh,
There's some humor in there that I was like, caught me off guard.
Yeah.
Good. That's the hopes. Yeah. Steph definitely amped up that humor with, like she was talking about, adding things into the background. If you just flip the scene inside the gas station, and like some of the best visual gags are just all in the gas station. There's so many jokes that Steph threw in there that are awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Well, thank you guys again. We'll hope you keep making more great novels or graphic novels. And we'll just keep an eye for those for whenever we want to purchase them, or even do another workshop if you guys are willing to. That way we get newer audiences, whoever wants to, like I said, pursue that path. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Do you guys want to share other things besides what you guys talked about?
I guess that's really it. Lumberjackula. I'm very excited about it. It comes out July 19th.
Okay.
It's about this kid who's half lumberjack, half vampire, and he isn't sure which of his parents' schools he wants to go to because he doesn't want to go to either. He wants to go to a dance school. So there's lots of fun like dance scenes in it. And yeah, I'm really proud of it and excited for it to be out in the world.
Okay. Yeah.
We'll definitely get it.
Yes.
Yeah, my next book isn't coming out. It doesn't have a select date, but it's coming out in 2023. But all I can say is it's about a middle school who cuts all of their arts programs and extracurriculars and gives all the money to their football team. And so an effort to kind of be able to be their nerdy creative selves and practice their different respective like theater and arts and all that stuff and cosplay and stuff like that. A bunch of kids get together and make a pro wrestling club as a loophole to be creative and fun and kind of stick it to the school a little bit. Yeah, but that's
We'll
going
also
to be
be waiting for it.
Yep, looking forward to it. All right, so I guess that wraps up the interview slash workshop. Did receive a message saying that you guys are awesome. You both.
Yay, thank you. You guys are too. Thank you for coming here.
Yes, thank you.
And I guess, does anybody have any questions? Those who are currently in the chat or in the meeting. Let's see.
Yeah, don't be afraid. We like questions.
Right.
Ask away.
I guess let's give it a few seconds.
Yes, my favorite book that I've ever made is Martian Ghost Centaur because I work with Steph, if that was the question.
Nice.
You got to be careful saying that. We work with lots of different people. You can't say that.
Yeah.
All right, well, you guys have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much for being
Thank
here,
you,
guys.
Yeah.
Bye,
no
Everyone,
problem.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.